Welcome, welcome, welcome to the new reality of senior living. I'm so glad you can join us. It's been fascinating to watch how we as a country and we as an industry respond to this very, very difficult time with the COVID-19 virus, mostly with very few exceptions. I just watch our industry and I have nothing but amazing pride for what each of you are doing as we adjust to this new reality. It's easy to look at the negative, and I've seen plenty of that, but I've also seen just some joyous, wonderful stories. And so we very quickly put together this webinar with Valerie Whitman at LeadingResponse to really talk about how do we go forward in the marketing or lead generation in this new reality that we're in. And so I'm just delighted to be able to have Valerie and Kelly present. I'm going to give you just a little bit of information. We are recording this, and so if you want to go back and watch it later, we will have it up either by the end of the day or sometime tomorrow. It takes us a little bit of time to get it edited and rendered and back up into a format where we can make it available to you. Valerie, I think you've got some additional resources to people coming to. Is that correct or not? I should have asked you this before and I forgot.
Yes, we have a handout.
Perfect. Okay, and then we will have our chat box open. There are a couple things we'd love to make this interactive. And so if you have a question, you'll see down at the bottom of your screen a little thing that says question and answer. Feel free to drop that in there. If it's something that we can answer by typing it and not relevant to the group, we will do that. Otherwise, I will toss it at Valerie and Kelly. And the other thing is that you'll also see down there a little chat box. And so if you can click on that chat box right now, we would love to have you tell us, just type in there where you are from, city, state, community. So I am from Citrus Heights, CITRUS, California. That's me. And here we go, Seattle, Houston, Embark Senior Living. Look at that. They'll cover in the whole world. And I think that's all I need to tell you. We'll probably ask you some questions and look for some response along the way. And Valerie, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you teach us some things.
Great, thanks, Steve. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Thank you for your time today. We have our friend Kelly Sizemore on with us as well. She is from Lane Ad Agency, and they support senior living clients, particularly in the IL space. And she's here today to share some of the things that they're doing for their clients during this COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll be talking with her throughout the program, and certainly any questions that you have for her, feel free to ask, as Steve said, in the chat. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. Again, it's being recorded, and we'll be sending this out to you afterwards, along with a handout of just, kind of tips on what to do in terms of lead generation marketing strategies during COVID-19. So first, I just want to start by recognizing everyone that is on the webinar today. I come from the senior living space of about 15 years now and started in a community position. And, I understand, I know I can speak for Steve and for Kelly as well, that, what each and every one of you are doing today, regardless of, where you exist in the organization and in the industry, is just so magnificent to the residents, to the families, to the staff. It's not easy. We train for this as an industry. We do our drills. No one could have trained for this pandemic, of course, but we are a resilient industry, and I just want to thank each and every one of you for what you're doing. So just a little bit about LeadingResponse and who we are, and then we're going to jump into the various lead generation efforts that you can be doing today and beyond COVID-19. We are a provider of customer acquisition solutions. So we're both a traditional and digital marketing organization. We take an omni-channel approach. Many of you know us for the thousands and thousands of marketing campaigns that we do every month across the country. And really what that allows us to do is have a significant amount of data in terms of consumer behavior data, best call to actions, really the way that this consumer segment, this 55 and older group, wants to be communicated with and the type of information that they need. So this pivot, if you will, of not being able to tour, not being able to move people in, not being able to host your traditional face-to-face marketing events, is something that we're familiar with in terms of the other strategies that we have in place for clients. So for example, we connect over 100,000 consumers per month to our clients via landing pages, one-on-one phone appointments, and in-person appointments. And so not everything we do is event-based, or if you will, face-to-face. So we do have platforms like end-to-end webinar platform in place to help support clients who are having to shift away from face-to-face marketing events. It's a challenge for us in our industry, but we're going to get back to those. But for now, there are other solutions, and that's one of the reasons that we're here talking today. So these are some of the things that we're going to be discussing today, and thinking about as we start re-engaging with our prospects. And when I say prospects, not just our prospects that are in our lead base, but also the larger community, the new prospects that we're going to be engaging with, as well as, seniors and the adult children in your neighborhoods, because we are local businesses. At the end of the day, we do support our communities, not just within our own house, if you will, but also, within the, primary market area, and all of our seniors in our various neighborhoods. So one question I want to ask before we get into this is if you could just write in the chat box there, how many of you are still accepting move-ins, whether it be on an urgent basis or individual basis, depending on the situation. It would be great to know how many of you are still, if you will, open to move-ins. So if you can just put in the chat box there if yes you are or no you aren't. And Steve, if you don't mind, as you see those chats coming in, just give us an idea if we're seeing a lot of yeses or a lot of nos.
Yeah, so it's really fun, interesting to watch. Most of the public stuff I've been seeing on LinkedIn, so again, mostly public stuff, has been suggesting that most people are not doing move-ins. But when I'm looking at this and when I've been talking to people, I'm mostly hearing that people are continuing to allow move-ins, to support move-ins, both on a urgent basis and non-urgent basis. I do think that people are mostly not doing tours because of the risk they're involved. And of course, sometimes we've got one here that says quarantine required, pre-schedules only. Most people, it looks like, are doing move-ins, although some have indicated they're having to do 14-day quarantines. And another one, I really like this, offering FaceTime tours and assessments. So lots of really creative, cool stuff. I appreciate that. I'll probably steal this for an article. So I appreciate that.
Great, good to know. I know, to your point, we see a lot on the news and we hear a lot from our various clients nationwide, but it's good to hear that in some instances where you are able to still allow for move-ins that you can, because at the end of the day, seniors and families still need us. There are still people being discharged from the hospital that require care, and senior living is the best option for them. So I'm happy to hear that's still happening where it can. Great. Okay, so let's jump into communication and messaging. And just looking at this image, this is something that struck me because in talking to clients, we have been talking about, of course, social distancing that we're all doing, and just the challenges for many of us that have kids home from school, and just the overall disruption of our schedule and how it's impacting us. And One of the things that we have talked to clients about, and, we all, I think, know this to some degree, but if we can take a step back and think about this, the social isolation that we have all been feeling the last few weeks is something that many seniors feel every single day. And we, as an industry, of course, talk about this. We talk about it with family members and the value of being in senior living to prevent isolation and to help that senior really engage with others. And so, I urge you to just keep that in mind as we're all frustrated with social distancing and all of the challenges that we face, that unfortunately for many seniors living home alone, this is the world that they live in day to day outside of COVID-19. So when you're communicating with folks, it's important to be authentic and genuine and simply ask them how they're doing. Don't avoid the topic or treat things as business as usual. It's really important to be able to use this time to connect with people. People are home more, and so you're going to be able to have more of those conversations. And we'll talk about the modes of communication as we go throughout this. But also, being sincere and helping them recognize that we're all in this together, and you're there for them, and you want to be able to support them through this. Being inquisitive as well. This is a great time also for learning more about our prospects and being inquisitive and finding out what they're most concerned about during this pandemic. And being resourceful. When I think about things similar to this, right? So not being able to get to seniors, not being able to bring people in to tour. We're a very creative industry in the sense that we meet people where they're at. And so don't forget about the ability to take a meal from your dining room on your way home that day from work and drop it off to the doorstep of a senior that is struggling to get out to the grocery store or doesn't have any local families living nearby. Those things we can still do, and obviously we need to do them differently and do them safely, but that's another great way. It's just a small act of kindness, but that can go a long way for a senior who's not quite sure where they might get their next meal.
Yeah,
and Kelly, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't remember who it is. Maybe somebody knows and will pop in the chat, but I understand there's a senior living community that's actually doing, will deliver, I think they deliver them all at one time, but they'll deliver 3 meals for $15. And that includes the delivery and the food. And what a great way to build relationships. Want to reinforce that it could be such a powerful way to build those relationships.
Great point. Do you want to add anything here in terms of what your communities are doing in this area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just echo, Valerie, what you shared. I'm hearing a lot of feedback from our client communities that the sales teams are having some of the more genuine conversations that they've probably ever had with some of their leads, just because we're all experiencing this together, and it kind of creates that natural jumping off point for a really important conversation. And I think they're learning a lot about family dynamics and just how people are feeling, and being able to be very genuine and caring at a time when everybody needs it. I think the long effect of this, the positive long-term effect of this, is those relationships that we have with our leads and how we're able to have conversations and form those relationships. I think it's going to be a very positive thing. But certainly when we're all sequestered in our homes, it's the phone is that one thing that we can still do, and we have a captive audience. So it's just a really great opportunity to connect in a one-to-one genuine way.
Great points.
Great.
Let's talk a little bit about increasing brand awareness. And I know we've talked with clients over the last few weeks, and certainly for everyone, I'm sure it feels like it's been longer than a few weeks. But in those last few weeks, those conversations, we've talked with folks about, the challenges. How do I continue to get my brand out there, but do it in a way that is relevant and not, insensitive, right? So we can't be sending out our traditional messaging about call to come in for tours, but we also can't stop marketing either, because we know that one, the community and the larger community needs us. They need to hear from us. They need to know what we're doing during this time, how we're managing, how we're keeping our residents, safe and healthy, and our staff and the families. But it's also important to, think about how you're communicating with people and having to do it differently. And we'll talk a little bit more about really the options that have been out there and available to us for a while. But, not everyone has incorporated them because we haven't had to. We've had the luxury of touring people and face-to-face marketing events and our more traditional marketing efforts. But it's important to be the brand that shows them that you care, like we were just talking about, whether that be through phone calls or various touch points. And it is important to have those various touch points in place. And then being supportive, responding to them that we are in this together. Being the brand that highlights your value. And so, we've all seen a lot over the last few weeks on social media, and you'll see a few clips in the presentation today where, we're showing the world what we do in senior living. And we're showing them that although we might be quarantined and we might not be gathering everyone in the dining room, that we're still enjoying a great time with our residents. We're still doing bingo. We're still doing happy hours. We might be driving that alcohol cart around the hallways and providing it door to door versus them being in the dining room. But, all of the residents know where their next meal is coming from, and they know where their prescriptions are coming. They don't have to worry if they're going to get out to the grocery store or if they're going to be able to get out to the pharmacy. So it's important to highlight what you're doing as an organization to help your existing residents, again, your staff as well, and get them through this time. And then being the brand that's consistent. And as I mentioned before, we are a resilient and dependable industry. And so it's important for us to showcase that. And we can do that through many different ways. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I want to ask another question.
Valerie, I'm going to stop you here for a second. We have had in the chat, and a lot of you can see this, but maybe not everybody, there are some amazing things that people are going to do. And so what we will do is we'll actually compile all this and put together a tip sheet. So if you want to continue sharing the things you're doing, that would be a powerful way to share to our community here. So I just want to acknowledge all that you're putting this in here, and we'll make sure it gets shared out. So back to you, Valerie.
Great, thanks, Steve. So if you folks are doing any of these things, whether they be webinars or video messaging, we know we're all doing social media, right? We're all doing some of these kind of staple efforts, but, type into the chat box what you are doing. And if there's anything else that you don't see on the screen here, such as maybe podcasts, feel free to type that in as well. We'd love to hear, what you are doing and what you plan to continue to do, throughout COVID-19.
One question that did come in, Valerie, and I'm not sure whether you're going to address it, but I think would be really helpful is this, and it's a great question. It's how do you actually go about doing virtual tours?
I'm sorry, the question is how do you do what?
How do you do virtual tours?
Great question. So there are some platforms out there that you use for virtual tours. There are some organizations out there that can help you put together virtual tours that are going to be more professional than walking around with your smartphone. But that is another way that you can do it, and we're going to actually talk about that in the presentation today. So we'll get to that actually in the next few slides. But there are a couple of different ways you can go about virtual tours. So Steve, are we seeing in the chat that a lot of folks are doing various things here? I'm curious to see how many folks might be doing webinars.
So what we're seeing is the one-day app, video, email calls, virtual tours, Zoom meetings, Easter treat bags, sort of not directly use an app called One Day. Of course, we're big fans of One Day. They're also sponsors, and we think it's a great way to do that. So Facebook, Google, our website, email, just, the creativity that I see in talking about and telling our stories is just really remarkable to me.
Excellent, great. Okay, so let's dig into a few of these a little bit more in depth. Webinars would be one that we're seeing more and more folks shift to. LeadingResponse does have an end-to-end webinar solution. So for anyone that doesn't either know of a webinar platform that would work well for them or doesn't want to deal with managing all of that, as well as, of course, driving new traffic to those webinars, we're happy to help you. But essentially, webinars are a great way outside of being able to do your traditional face-to-face marketing events, as well as bringing people into tour, to still essentially get face-to-face, just like we're doing on this webinar today. So, Steve uses the Zoom platform, which is great. But there are some platforms out there, for example, the one that we have, there is no need to download anything. So you want to keep in mind the audience that we have in senior living is not necessarily going to be very tech savvy, and not to say that you need to be for a webinar, but I don't know about anyone else, but if there's, an issue for me when I'm trying to download something, sometimes that just sends me sideways and then I just say, forget it. So we want to make sure that given our audience that we're making it very easy for them in terms of being able to, virtually communicate with us in the form of a webinar. And then it allows you a broader reach than your primary market area, your PMA. And so typically when you're doing a marketing event, consumer behaviors tell us you shouldn't go beyond a 15 or 20-minute drive time. And in this case, while you still want to stay within your market, you can, stretch that radius a little bit more. You still want to make sure there are people that would be willing to drive and visit their loved one or move there because they wouldn't have to essentially relocate and change their doctors and their typical routines. But it does allow you to essentially, increase your primary market area. And then driving new prospects, it's a great way to be able to do that. So you can still use some of your traditional methods that you would to promote, let's say, a face-to-face marketing event, but you would do so using a webinar as the call to action. And you can also host them more frequently. They're less costly than putting on a marketing event where you have food involved, especially if you're doing it off-site. For any pre-lease communities, yes, you have those dollars built into your budget to do it off-site, but it does mean that you can only do it so many times versus a webinar that you can host, twice a month versus a marketing event that you would have done once a month.
So Valerie, one of the questions that you just sort of addressed it, but maybe we could do a little bit of a deeper dive into is what exactly, if you're in a pre-opening phase, what do you do to continue to build and nurture those prospects and to grow your move-in base? So webinars are a great place to start. Other thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, and Kelly, I'm going to have you jump in here as well. I mean, I think that, we have to, as sales and marketing professionals, continue to keep that engine going, whether it be COVID-19 or anything else that we've experienced in the past, earthquakes, blizzards, things like that impact our senior living communities. But you want to be able to take a step back and reevaluate what your marketing plan is, what your marketing budget is, because we don't know how long this is going to last for. And so for those communities that are in pre-lease and you're not able to host at a restaurant, for example, a webinar is a perfect way to still be able to market, still be able to get that information to your consumer base. But essentially, you're going to have to deliver that message in a different way and interact with folks in a different way. Kelly, do you want to share some of the things? I know you've got one client in particular that quickly pivoted with a situation like this.
Yes, I would say I don't think senior living has been traditionally known as a fast-moving industry. I think typically we're often slow to respond, but this last couple weeks has just been very illuminating and eye-opening, because I would say last week was all about the immediate triage and making sure that we had the right information on the websites, that we were adjusting events that were already in market. We had to relook at the entire campaign and make sure that things that we're posting to social media didn't immediately sound tone deaf, because we were now looking at everything through a different lens. but yes, with certain clients, we had already issued event invitations and had to basically say, okay, we can't have it on site anymore, so let's move it to an off-site location. And then as things sort of evolved even more, and we all recognize the seriousness of it, it was then shifting from, we're not even going to have people gathering together. So how do we now take this to an a virtual environment and be able to reach out to everybody who's already RSVP'd, reach out and reinforce this new invitation to entice some of those people who haven't already RSVP'd but might be open to this now and curious. So with the help of Valerie and her team, we were able to do that. It's the example you're speaking to here recently, to some really great success. And we were pleasantly surprised by the engagement. And I think this shift that we're making, even though it's not voice and we're having to do it out of need, because particularly in a pre-lease situation where there's a lot of dollars at stake, you've got people who have put down a deposit, but they haven't made that final commitment. So they have every opportunity to back out, which we don't want them to do. We have to keep things moving. And I think by trying these new approaches and ways of engaging, including webinars, my feeling is that once we get past this is going to be another regular tool in our toolbox to be able to engage people who may be further away, or engage people when it's inclement weather or whatever. But I think forcing ourselves to stretch and try these new approaches, it's just going to broaden the tools in our toolbox coming out of this. And that's a good thing.
Great points, Kelly. Agreed. And some of these things like the webinars and digital, these are things that have happened behind the scenes for a long time already, and many of us engage in these various strategies. And so, I think as an industry, we need to just remind ourselves that yes, although right now temporarily we can't do marketing events, we can't host tours, and those are such critical components to the sales cycle and nurturing our leads, that we do have these other options and these other platforms that some of us are not familiar with or necessarily comfortable with, but it's fairly easy to implement them. And I think they are going to be around afterwards, because there'll be various ways to communicate with our audiences, both near and far. So video messaging content, so this is important, where we want to keep it short and simple. We know that, anything under a 2-minute video or even a 1-minute video, you're going to have more people interested in watching it. Make it personal when you can. So if you're doing a quick video recording, literally with your smartphone, for the sales and marketing community team members on the phone, if you've got a smartphone, you can literally just do a quick video. You can ask a colleague to, stand 6 feet away and record you to send a quick message to a prospect. And you can text it to them, you can email it to them, right from your phone. And so, keeping in mind that these small things you can do can have a large impact, because people want to be able to see you, they want to interact and engage with you. And as I mentioned before, there are some video messaging platforms out there as well that you can engage with, but you can also simply just do this, from your office, walking through the community. So that's another great way from a virtual tour perspective. Talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides as well. Showcasing an area of your community. Again, it's so important to get the message out there, to let people see what we're doing in senior living, especially during this time. So it's always important to showcase what we're doing in our communities, and that's why we tour, right? So we want to be able to show the culture and show the engagement of our residents and our associates with our residents. But this is a way that you can do that virtually. Interviewing staff members, 30-second commercial type of thing that many of you are familiar with. So when you normally tour someone around and you're talking to an associate and they're talking to the family that's touring, giving them an idea of, you know, why they work in this industry and what they love most about the community and engaging with the residents, just record that and send it off. I mean, it's literally that simple to do. Put it on social. Of course, you want to make sure you have, you know, the signed waivers from residents to make sure that they're okay with that. But there's a lot that we can do with our smartphones.
Valerie, I would just jump in there to say we've had some really good luck with leveraging some of that. I think crisis kind of situations like this where we all are feeling in it together, it's really created a unique platform for us to change the narrative a little bit. I think before, where we're always trying to sell the features and benefits, we've been able to continue to produce content that really is, I think, a lot more emotional than we typically are able to be, because we're able to share these great stories. We've produced, you know, whether it was video that we are sending to our leads or posting on a YouTube channel with links from the website or social media post or wherever. We've got to capture a lot of great stories from just staff members showing their conviction and resolve during all of this. So some really great stories are already coming out, and we're just working as fast as we can to capture them, whether they're written or on a, you know, it doesn't have to be, I guess my point is, it doesn't have to be this high production quality where you can just capture something, post it on your YouTube channel, get it on your website. But there's just some really fantastic resident stories, staff stories. We've had some depositors at a community that isn't open yet get on a video, and I think his quote was, you know, every storm eventually runs out of rain, and so this will pass too. And, you know, just getting those messages out there. I think everybody's a little road weary from all the doom and gloom and bad messages, that it's nice to tell these great stories, which isn't selling technically, but it really is. And I think it's so powerful and so much more authentic and emotional than we typically can be. So it's really a great opportunity. You just have to, in the midst of everything else we're scrambling to do, grab onto that content and get it out there and share it, because it really, there's a universal thread throughout us all right now that we can relate to this.
So question in the chat, Valerie, how do you actually go about engaging residents in a webinar?
Engaging residents in a webinar.
Not residents, but prospects. I didn't do that right. So engaging prospects in a webinar.
So the way you would do that, there's a couple of different ways. So if you think about what you would normally do when you're targeting new prospects to come to a marketing event, you would essentially be replacing that face-to-face marketing event with a webinar solution. And there's a few different ways to do that. So you can still do that through direct mail. You can still do that digitally. If you're doing it direct mail, you know, you have to keep the URL short and sweet, which is essentially a vanity URL, or if you're using our platform, we manage that for you. But essentially, there's a way that you can drive people, if it's a direct mail piece, which is still a great way to communicate with this audience, you want to be able to drive them to whether it's your website to sign up for the webinar or it's a platform like ours. And then you're seeing who those people are, just like you would an RSVP for a marketing event. Same thing with digital. You know, it's easy to have something on Facebook, and then you're having them click through to then register for the webinar. So it just depends on the platform you're using and also the capabilities you have, you know, with landing pages, or how quickly you can develop that and add them to your website.
Well, and I would add that inside the context of a webinar, just like this one, we have had, I don't know what the count will be, but I'll bet by the time we're done, we'll have had 100 or 150 comments in the comment. And so you can use the chat set part of it, if it's a live webinar like this, to actually have text conversations with people. And so that's another very powerful way to turn it into not just a one-way, but a two-way conversation. And if it were a really small group, I don't know about your platform, but I know a lot of platforms, you can actually open it up even in a webinar to allow voice communication from your audience to have conversations as well. So those would be a couple of other things that you might do.
Great points. Yes, Steve. So absolutely, the webinar, you can engage with people. You can ask poll questions. You can, unmute the audience, which we would really only recommend if it's a smaller group, just
Right.
logistically. But yes, absolutely. And then the chat box as well, which you're all using. And for some of you that aren't that familiar with webinars, it's fairly easy to use the chat box. And so, the key to it in many cases is that if you're presenting, you want to have someone else, another team member that's essentially, checking the chat box and keeping the time and things like that. So, it tends to be two people that can really help execute the actual webinar. Okay, so now let's shift our thoughts here to social and how you're engaging with people that way. So only 39% of people 55 and older do not use media. So again, I know most of us, if not all of us on this call, are using some forms of social media, but now more than ever, because again, people are home more, they're paying attention, they're hungry for information from media outlets and from people that they had been engaging with prior to COVID-19. So this can speak to your existing lead base as well as gaining new prospects. So some of the things that you can do with social media campaigns, we've been talking about, those short video clips. To Kelly's point, it doesn't have to be any type of, formal production. Just start recording and, get those things uploaded so that you're constantly communicating. Because during a time like this, we need to be over communicating because we're all, kind of dispersed. We're all, quarantined in our homes and things like that. So, the communication is so critical and of course needs to be relevant content as we've been talking about. Facebook Live is another great way, again, for those of you walking around, you're going to the community because you're essential associates and you want to make sure that you're there for your residents. And so take the opportunity to do Facebook Live. We have some clients that are doing, every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., they're running a Facebook Live chat where it's a Q&A session. So really just try to engage and use those platforms and get comfortable and familiar with them. Facebook survey polls is another great way to engage with people and get a sense of where they're at and how they're feeling. It's a great opportunity to further engage and nurture those leads and also develop new leads. Fun things like daily posts with trivia questions. I mean, these are all things that we know happening in the community, but take them to social is essentially the goal here, right? And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I think we've all seen plenty of, whether it be video clips or different quotes that didn't necessarily mean to go viral, but they did. And they had a great impact on so many people. And so there's really just endless opportunities here. Same thing with educational posts, again, updating on COVID-19 efforts. People want to know what you're doing to keep your residents and staff and families safe. And then an opportunity for frequently asked questions. And Kelly, I want to turn it over to you. I know you've got some information to add as well of what you do for your clients as it relates to social.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, but the first thing we had to do, there were quite a few posts that we had to pull out of the rotation immediately because we typically will plan on a monthly basis what the content's going to be. And so we did that and ended up pulling posts that were, things related to, spring has sprung, get out and here's 7 things you can go do. Just things like that just no longer were applicable given what really started to unfold last week. But then it also gave us a chance to infuse new information. And at first it was, I would say, content related to how to be safe and where to get good information. But now I think we're really taking the stance of just trying to provide good information and good stories and some positive reinforcement, because I think what we're seeing is it's really been an opportunity to reinforce the category. We work with life plan communities and you know, you talk about the financial benefits and having this network of support. We do that often anyway, but this really has opened it up to really demonstrate what does that mean in a situation like this. What does it mean to live in a life plan community and have this network of support, both from the staff, keeping you safe and healthy, but also the isolation aspect of it. You know, even residents of our communities are socially distancing, but they still know that they're supported and they still have each other, and there's something very powerful about that.
Great. So here are a few clips that I mentioned earlier. Some of you have probably seen these, but again, you know, these are the types of things that we're talking about. So whether it's, you know, your activity director or really any staff member, again, the only thing that I would say here is just make sure that you have, you know, approval from residents, you know, the waivers in place in their file that, you know, that you can share photos or video clips or Facebook Live type of thing. But these are just all so great that, again, we know in the industry, we do these things all the time outside of COVID-19, but it's a way to show the rest of the world that this is what we do. And these people are happy and safe, and again, not having to worry about where is their next meal coming from, or how am I going to get my mom's med cassette filled when I can't get over there to her for whatever reason. So let's talk a little bit more about digital campaign marketing. So these are some of the things that we do for our clients that, you know, these are the things that you want to make sure that you're capturing within your digital campaign marketing. And really, you know, you want to make sure you continue an omni-channel approach, even though your call to actions are going to have to be tailored during this time. So as we talked about before, you don't want call to actions that, you know, reflect coming into tour or coming to a marketing event or coming in for, you know, lunch or dinner type of thing. You want to be very careful with your messaging and make sure your content is relative. And so, you know, looking at these different options, whether it be Facebook or some of the other digital options, you have the ability to hyper target, which is so critically important, whether you're using, you know, direct mail or digital, to make sure that you're driving qualified prospects. Make sure those dollars are really working hard for you and you're getting some good ROI. And then increasing your brand awareness, having that flexibility like we talked about, you know, where a call to action may be to a webinar or even a scheduled phone appointment, because our phones still work, which is so great because people are home more, and so they're more available to answer the call and be able to talk with us and continue building that relationship. Email, text reminders, those are all things that are still in place. And so we want to make sure that we're doing those things to, again, continue to engage with folks, recognizing that, for example, if you are doing a webinar instead of a marketing event, you want to make sure you're hand-holding people, because webinars are going to be new to many of our consumers. Some of the adult children may use them in their professional careers, but it's something that we just need to keep in mind and make sure it's a very easy to use platform and that we're hand-holding them through the process. Digital marketing, digital targeting, a little bit more in depth here. So you can go as deep as age, asset, and location. We do that for our clients. So not just the lookalike campaigns with Facebook, for example. You can get more granular now. We have a very unique situation where we do so much direct mail from a list provider perspective that we also have the ability to tie back those demographics, assets, to the Facebook campaigns, and that's not something most can do because it's just economies of scale. But those are some of the things that we do for clients as well. And then also the retargeting. So many of us are familiar with that, but we're going to talk a little bit more in a moment about retargeting from digital users on your website to direct mail, because again, that is still a great way to communicate with this audience, and you want to be able to communicate with them in various ways. 24/7 campaign management. This is an opportunity where you can see who these folks are before you're even talking with them. So our platform is built in a way that you can see demographic data. You can see how they came to you, whether it be by phone or online. We do have call center agents out of our Florida office, and those are live agents. So they're helping with getting folks registered for, an upcoming webinar, for example, making phone call reminders, text message reminders, their mobile check-in features through the webinar platform, just using technology the best we can. And again, this is something that's been in place that we've done for a long time, but it's just really come to the forefront now, given that we can't do, face-to-face marketing events for our clients. So let's talk a little bit about direct mail. And Kelly, I'm going to pass this over to you as well, because I know that this is something many of your clients, in pre-lease, in independent living have been doing. And, yes, the call to actions have been tied to marketing events very frequently, but, some of the things that you folks have shifted to be able to, respond to the situation we're in now.
Yeah, I would say, when it comes to lead engagement, the website and direct mail by and large are what we call sort of the bread and butter lead generation tools. And what we quickly began to realize last week in particular is that direct mail was probably the hardest hit first, because so much of what we do with direct mail is event promotion, and that whole dynamic change in what felt like overnight. So I think things are continually changing with each day, but we're going to have to realize that this is still a great way to connect with people. We can't necessarily do the typical model that has worked so well and continues to work so well, because it's just different. And for the foreseeable future, we have to live in this reality. So being able to still utilize it, but shift from the typical event promotion into more of other ways to engage. So that might be promoting a webinar, or it might be more sharing of information, or offering to provide a fulfillment guide or information, or ways to connect even one-on-one. I think you can still think about direct mail as a great way to connect and get into the hands and households that you're targeting. It's just going to have to be a different call to action, and not so heavily reliant on those physical in-person event promotions that we've seen in the past. So it's a shift, but it's one of those things where I think when we force ourselves to think differently coming out of this, we might have some new ideas that we kind of incorporate into the normal rotation, even when we can go back to those in-person events. But people are hungry, they're captive audience. And I think if you want to send somebody a message and this is a good way to get him out in front of them, don't shy away from certainly leveraging that. But there's also ways to keep those events going, as Valerie has shared already.
Great. And I think, direct mail can get a bad rap. I know, prior to joining LeadingResponse 5 years ago, I had no idea that things like ailment data existed, or familial connections, where you can target the adult daughter who lives in the same proximity as the senior. And so it really is important. It's not just the direct mail piece itself, but, are you incorporating things like consumer behavior data, best practices around what are the strongest call to actions, what should you be able to expect in terms of response rate and conversion rates from this method. And so it absolutely is still a very viable option, but it should be part of your omni-channel approach, like we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. This is more about the retargeting that you can do with your existing website traffic. So we all know that we spend a fair amount of time, especially for the marketers on the phone that, have your digital marketing teams and everything you can to drive traffic, SEO, SEM, but you aren't seeing the conversions that you want to see, you know, that the forms filled out, the leads into your lead base, essentially your web leads. And so there is a way that you can retarget through direct mail once you filter through the demographics. So what you want to be able to do is capture those qualified users on your website that left your website and for whatever reason did not fill out a form. They didn't engage in a live chat that you might have on your website. You know, they essentially just left without taking any action. And so by getting a piece in the mail to them within a few days, shows your brand, it resonates with them because they remember being on your site a few days before. And what's great about this is that you also have the ability to see the activity of that IP address. So you can know if, let's say the demographics come back and that person is between age 18 and 35, they spent the majority of the time on your careers page. Well, you can identify that user as someone that was looking for a job versus the 68-year-old that spent time on your care and services pages. So you can send various messages out to folks based on their activity on your site. And it's really just another way to get in front of them and capture some of those missed opportunities where you've already paid for those leads to essentially come to your site. Whatever reason they didn't take action. So that's another thing that you can do. And again, outside of COVID-19, but your messaging will be different if you're using this type of platform now.
I would just add to that, this feature enables you to really tailor direct mail in a way that's that is exactly in the pocket for what they're looking for. We don't always have that insight when we send direct mail to know what segments the people are interested in what, but by being able to model it off of their online behavior, it doesn't have to be an event invitation. It can be additional content about whatever it is that they're interested in, and you can go a little bit deeper. It also has a good shelf life, so something that comes in the mail can also sit on the table for the next day versus an ad that's up and gone with a passing click.
Great point. Yeah, and I think the other thing to note about this type of program is that, you know, again, for those digital marketers, it can also give you the analytics beyond what Google Analytics provides. So it can tell you, you know, if you have 5,000 users in a month and how many of those are matching back to your qualified demographics. So what are the ages? What are the incomes, the assets? Homeowner status. So you can see, you know, are you driving the right traffic, or do you maybe need to change up some of your keywords? You know, maybe a fairly large percent of that 5,000 a month is coming back as unqualified traffic from a, you know, financial perspective. So it can also be very helpful in just, you know, determining who is on your site from a demographic perspective and what changes you might need to incorporate. The old-fashioned telephones, we've been talking a lot about this throughout in terms of just being genuine and connecting with people and you know, not underestimating the value of this. And this is regardless of whether the people on the other end of the phone have a smartphone or not. I mean, this is really just being genuine, connecting with people, offering them support if they need it, making sure that you have a strategy before the call, you know, always scheduling a next step before ending the call. FaceTime is another great thing that you can use, provided the person on the other end, of course, has the capability to do that. And then also three-way calling. And a lot of us have done this over the years where, you know, there might be a son in one area of the country who manages finances and a daughter who is, you know, a little bit closer to mom. And you want to be able to get multiple family members and decision makers on the phone at the same time. So again, those are all still things that we can be doing and that we need to be doing because we need to continue to help families as they're going through the process, whether they started the process before COVID-19 or they have found themselves with more time and really needing to consider what the next steps look like for their loved one, especially during a time like this where, like we've talked about, they may not know where they're going to get their next meal from. The seniors are very weary about going out. The CDC is telling them, in particular, this population to stay home. And so, you know, those are all things that are weighing heavily on their minds and in the minds of their adult children as well. And then video sharing via text or email, like we talked about before, it can be as simple as, you know, just recording something on your smartphone and sending it over. Of course, you want to make sure you've had that conversation with the prospect first. so that you know if they have the capability, you know that if they're comfortable with that. Many of us have been texting with prospects for a while now, so that's becoming more and more popular as people are so busy. And then also something to think about, just like with the Facebook polls or surveys, you can do the same thing on the phone and just keep it short and simple. Asking 3 questions, I would say 5 max, and they can be very basic questions, somewhat open-ended because you really want to get as much information as you can. So you think of it as kind of discovery, but at the same time, you're going to be keeping track of, what the answers are as you're talking to your lead base and really getting a sense of what are they most concerned about during this time. And as Kelly mentioned earlier, it could very well be finances. It could be, something that you weren't necessarily thinking would be the case, but as you get more and more data, you can see that there's maybe a trend where people are very concerned about being able to get their medications, or their home care agency hasn't been able to come out because of staffing challenges, or whatever the case might be. So just in summary, continuing to market during COVID-19 is so crucial. Again, increasing and maintaining your brand awareness, and there's ways to do this in a very genuine, authentic way. Not that we weren't always doing that as an industry. I think that we are a very caring industry. We're certainly all here because we are, in an industry where you're called to care, and we're doing what we need to be doing for our residents and families and staff. But being able to showcase that during the most challenging times that many of us have ever seen, but keeping in mind that this audience, they've lived through the Depression, they lived through, polio and smallpox and all of these things. And so, keeping that in mind when you're talking to them, whether you're talking to them on the phone or you're sending them direct mail or ads on social, or, whatever it might be, however you're communicating out to them, it's important to help them see you as a resource and providing relevant content.
Yeah, I think from a content standpoint, we all have an opportunity to tell incredible stories, and that's not usually the case. I think when times are good, the storytelling isn't as compelling as what we have right now. I think it's making the time and the space, and taking a breath to capture it, and then making sure that you're getting it out on any number of the channels that we leverage.
So, Steve, do we have other questions? I know
we don't. I think that we have hit all the questions along the way. I want to just add 2 really quick things as you're sort of thinking about how you communicate. The first thing is that I have noticed in my professional life, people are just craving human connection. Monday and Tuesday in particular, I probably did 30 or 40 phone calls. A lot of them were really short, just checking in with people. And it was helpful to me, it was helpful to them. And you've talked about the phone calls. I just cannot overemphasize that. And then the other thing, Kelly, that you sort of touched on that I really liked is this idea that we have, and actually Valerie, you talked about it too, is we've got so many of these older folks have lived through some amazingly difficult times that really, frankly, we can't even imagine. And they figured out how to get through it. And I haven't seen a lot of senior living communities actually just sitting down with the residents and asking them to talk about those hard times. There have been pandemics, the World War II, and I think to have them talk about how they managed to keep their lives going, to stay positive, to move beyond them, could be a really, really powerful tool that could be used very effectively in your sales and marketing process.
Mm-hmm.
So, Valerie, Kelly, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. We've got some stuff to get out to you. Any last words from either one of you?
Just thank you again to everyone for all that you're doing. We know it's not easy, and we will all get through this. We are all in this together. So thank you for your time today.
Yes, thank you. I agree.
Thank you very much. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.